Hello, comrades. Today we will be reading Wretched of the Earth, page 120. Beforehand, the last reading we did, Frantz Fanon was talking about the effects that the new colonialism has on a country and in the underdeveloped world, and so on and so forth. And with that being said, Comrade Shay will be reading for us first. Comrade Shay, you have the floor.
Thank you. The struggle against the bourgeoisie in the underdeveloped countries is far from being simply theoretical. It is not a question of deciphering the way history has judged and condemned it. The national bourgeoisie in the underdeveloped countries should not be combated because it threatens to curb the overall harmonious development of the nation. It must be resolutely opposed because literally it serves no purpose. Mediocre in its winnings, in its achievements, and in its thinking. This bourgeoisie attempts to mask its mediocrity by ostentatious projects for individual prestige, premium-plated American cars, vacations on the French Riviera, and weekends in neon-lit nightclubs. The bourgeoisie, which increasingly turns its back on the overall population, fails even to squeeze from the West such spectacular concessions as valuable investments in the country's economy or the installation of certain industries. Assembly plans, however, are on the increase, a tendency that confirms the neo-colorless model in which the national economy is struggling. In no way, therefore, can it be said that the national bourgeoisie slows the country's development, that it is wasting the nation's time or possibly leading it into a dead end. But the truth is that the bourgeoisie phase in the history of the underdeveloped countries is a useless phrase. Once this caste has been eliminated, swallowed up by its own contradictions, it will be clear to everyone that no progress has been made since independence and that everything has to be started over again from scratch. This restructuring of the economy will not be based on the order set in place by the bourgeoisie during its reign, since this caste has done nothing else but prolong the heritage of the colonial economy, thinking, and institutions. It is that much easier to neutralize this bourgeoisie class since, as we have seen, it is numerically, intellectually, and economically weak. In the colonized territories after independence, the bourgeoisie caste draws its main strength from agreements signed with the former colonial power. The national bourgeoisie has even greater chance of taking over from the colonialist oppressor since it has been given every opportunity to maintain its close links with its ex-colonial power. But deep-rooted contradictions shake the ranks of this bourgeoisie, given the close observer in an expression of instability. There is not yet a homogeneity of case. Many intellectuals, for instance, condemn this regime based on domination by a select few. And in the underdeveloped countries, there are intellectuals, civil servants, and senior officials who sincerely feel the need for a planned economy, for Listen, let me give me a moment. Let me take this laptop to the room because there's music out here and that's distracting me.
Gotcha.
You know, I don't like it. I'm gonna criticize that later. But let me get out of here. Let me take
All
this
right.
to my room where it's nice and peace and quiet. No fucking noise out here. Oh, that shit gets me on my fucking nerves, man. I gotta put the gun in.
Comrade Joe, Comrade Che, you still there? There you are.
Yeah.
And we're willing to read a little bit also after Comrade Che is finished.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let me close this door. I don't want no noise. I'm sorry for the distractions.
No worries, Comrade Che, no worries.
It's just that there's a baby here and they try to entertain it and pacify with goddamn music. Okay, where was I at?
Civil servants and senior officials.
Where is that? Could somebody point to that?
It should be
Second line showing on the page right now, right up at the top. In the underdeveloped countries, they're in.
Okay. In underdeveloped countries that acquire independence, there's almost always a small number of upstanding intellectuals without set political ideas who instinctively distrust the race for jobs and handouts that is symptomatic of the aftermath of independence. The personal situation of these men, breadwinners for an extended family, or their life story, hardship, and strict moral upbringing, explain their clear distrust for the smart alerts and profiteers, professors. These men need to be used intellectually in the decisive struggle to steer the nation in a healthy direction. Barring the way to the national bourgeoisie is a sure way of avoiding the pitfalls of independence, the trials and tribulations of national unity, the decline of morals, the assault on the nation by corruption, an economic downturn, and in the short term, an entire democratic regime relying on force and intimidation. But it also means choosing the only way to go forward. The profoundly democratic and progressive elements of the young nation are reluctant and shy about making any decisions due to the apparent resilience of the bourgeoisie. The colonial cities of the newly independent, underdeveloped countries are teeming with the entire managerial class, for want of any serious analysis of the population as a whole. Observers are inclined to believe in the existence of a powerful and perfectly organized bourgeoisie. In fact, we now know that there is no bourgeoisie in the undeveloped countries. What makes a bourgeoisie is not its attitude, taste, or manners. It is not even its aspiration. The bourgeoisie is above all the direct product of precise economic realities. That's right.
Yep.
Economic reality in the colonies, however, is a falling where am I at now?
Foreign bourgeois reality.
Bourgeois, where's that at? Can you point it to it? I lost track of that. What makes a bourgeoisie is not its attitude, taste, or manners. It's not even its aspiration. The bourgeoisie is above all the direct product of precise economic realities. Economic reality in the colonies, however, is a foreign bourgeois reality. It is the
Exactly.
metropolitan bourgeois represented by its local counterparts, which is present in the colonial towns. Before independence, the bourgeoisie in the colonies is a Western bourgeoisie, an authentic branch of the metropolitan bourgeoisie from which it draws its legitimacy, its strength, and its stability. During the period of unrest preceding independence, indigenous intellectuals and business elements within this imported bourgeoisie endeavored to identify themselves with it. Theirs is a wish to identify permanently with the bourgeoisie representative from the metropolitans. Somebody else take over, please.
I'll continue reading, Comrade Che. Maybe that's okay with everyone. All right. So this bourgeoisie, which has unreservedly and enthusiastically adopted the intellectual reflexes, the reflexes characteristic of the metropolis, which has alienated to perfection its own thought and grounded its consciousness in typically foreign notions, has difficulty swallowing the fact that it is lacking in the one thing that makes a bourgeoisie: money. Exactly. The bourgeoisie of the developed countries is a bourgeoisie in spirit only. It has neither the economic power nor the managerial dynamism, nor the scope of ideas to qualify it as a bourgeoisie. Exactly. What makes a bourgeoisie is the ownership of the means of production. It's capital. That's what makes a bourgeoisie the bourgeoisie. The bourgeoisie of the global South is are puppets. There's puppets of the global North. They're puppet states of the imperial bourgeois of the global North. Sorry for going on a tangent there. The bourgeoisie of the other consequently, it is in its early stages and remains a bourgeoisie of civil servants. Whatever confidence and strength it possesses will derive from the position it occupies in the new national administration. Given time and opportunity by the authorities, it will succeed in amassing a small fortune that will reinforce its domination. But it will still prove incapable of creating a genuine bourgeois society with all of the economic and industrial consequences this supposes. The national bourgeoisie from the outset is geared toward intermediate activities. Its power base lies in its business sense and petty trading, its capacity to grab commissioners. It is not its money that is working, but its sense of business. It does not invest and cannot achieve that accumulation of capital needed for the formation and expansion of an authentic bourgeoisie. At this rate, it would take centuries for it to set up the rudiments of industrialization. In any case, it would come up against the implacable opposition of the former metropolis, which will have taken every possible precaution in the framework of neocolonialist agreements. If the authorities want to lift the country out of stagnation and take great strides towards development and progress, they first and foremost must nationalize the tertiary sector. The bourgeoisie, who wants the spirit of lucre and materialism to prevail, as well as its contemptuous attitude toward the masses and the scandalous aspect of profit or theft, we should say, in fact, invests invests massively in this sector. Sorry about that. Just doing something. Massively in this sector. Once dominated by the colonists, the tertiary sector is raided by the young national bourgeoisie. In a colonial economy, the tertiary sector is by far the most important. For the sake, sorry, what?
Tertiary.
Tertiary, that's what it is. Sorry, tertiary. For the sake of progress, the decision to nationalize this sector must be made in the first few hours. But it is evident that such a nationalization must not take on the aspect of rigid state control. This does not mean putting politically uneducated citizens in managerial positions. Every time this procedure has been adopted, it was found that the authorities had in fact contributed to the triumph of a dictatorship of civil servants trained by the former metropolis, who quickly proved incapable of thinking in terms of the nation as a whole. Yep, a comprador class. These civil servants swiftly began to sabotage the national economy and dismantle the national institutions, while corruption, fraud, misappropriation of goods, and black market trafficking set in. To nationalize the tertiary sector means organizing democratically the cooperatives for buying and selling. It means decentralizing these cooperatives by involving the masses in the management of public affairs. All of this obviously cannot succeed unless the people are politically educated. Previously, the need to clarify such a paramount issue once and for all would have been recognized. Today, the principle of educating the masses politically is generally taken for granted in the underdeveloped countries. But it is apparent that this basic task is not being honestly addressed. The decision to politicize the people implies that the regime expects to make popular support a condition for any action undertaken. A government which declares its intent to politicize the people expresses its desire to govern with the people and for the people. It should not use a language designed to camouflage a bourgeois leadership. Yep, literally. You can't just throw people random fucking terms and to confuse them. You need to connect with them. You need to connect with them and struggle with them. That's a true proletarian government, a true proletarian vanguard party. The bourgeois governments of the capitalist countries have long since left this infantile phase of power behind. They govern dispassionately, using their laws, their economic power, and their police force. Now that their authority is solidly established, they're not obliged to waste time with demagogic considerations. They govern in their own interests and make no nonsense about it. They have made themselves legitimate and are strong in their own right. The bourgeois caste of the newly independent countries has not yet attained either the cynicism or the sincerity on which the old bourgeoisies based their power. Hence its concerns to hide its deep-rooted convictions, to ally suspicions, in short, to demonstrate its popularity. It is not by mobilizing dozens or hundreds of thousands of men and women three or four times a year that you politically educate the masses. These meetings, these spectacular rallies are similar to the old pre-independence tactics, whereby you displayed your strength to prove to yourself and to others that you had the people on your side. The political education of the masses is meant to make adults out of them, and not to make them infantile. This brings us to consider the role that the political party in an underdeveloped country. We have seen in the preceding pages that very often simplistic minds belonging moreover to the emerging bourgeoisie repeatedly argue the need for an underdeveloped country to have a strong authority, even a dictatorship, to head its affairs. With this in mind, the party is put in charge of monitoring the masses. The party doubles the administration and a police force, and controls the masses, not with the aim of ensuring their actual participation in the affairs of the nation, but to remind them constantly that the authorities expect them to be obedient and disciplined. This dictatorship, which believes itself carried by history, which considers itself indispensable in the aftermath of independence, in fact symbolizes the decision of the bourgeois caste to lead the underdeveloped country, at first with the support of the people, but very soon against them. The gradual transformation of the party into an intelligence agency is indicative that the authorities are increasingly on the defensive. The shapeless mass of the people is seen as a blind force or fear. Sorry, I think my skipped the line. As a blind force or fear instilled by police presence. The party becomes a barometer, an intelligence service. The militant becomes an informer. He is put in charge of punitive missions against the villages. Embryonic opposition parties are eliminated at the stroke of a baton or in the hail of stones. Opposition candidates see their houses go up in flames. Yep, that right there is neocolonialism for you. The police are increasingly provocative. Under these circumstances, there is, of course, but a single party and government candidate receives 99% of the votes. We have to acknowledge that a certain number of governments in Africa operate along these lines. All the opposition parties, who were generally progressive and strove for a greater participation of the masses in the management of public affairs, who wanted to see their arrogant and mercantile bourgeoisie brought to heel, having bludgeoned and incarcerated into silence and then driven underground. Yep, literally what happens. In many of today's independent regions of Africa, the political party is being seriously bloated out of all proportion. In the presence of a party member, the people keep mum, behave like sheep, and pay tribute to the government and the leader. But in the streets, away from the village of an evening, in the cafe or in the river, the people's bitter disappointment, their desperation, but also their pent-up anger can be clearly heard. Instead of letting the people express their grievances, instead of making the free circulation of ideas between the people and the leadership its basic mission, the party erects a screen of prohibitions. The party leaders behave like common surgeons, major and constantly remind the people of the need to quote unquote keep silence in the ranks. This party, which claimed to be the servant of the people, which claimed to work for the people's happiness, quickly dispatches the people back in their caves as soon as the colonial authorities hand over the country. Yep, literally, just puppets. That's all they are, just new colonial puppets. The party will also commit many mistakes regarding national unity. For example, the so-called National Party operates on a tribal basis. It is a veritable ethnic group which has transformed itself into a party. This party, which readily proclaims itself national, which claims to speak the name of the people as a whole, secretly and sometimes openly sets up a genuine ethnic dictatorship. We are no longer witness to a bourgeois dictatorship, but to a tribal one. The ministers, private secretaries, ambassadors, and prefects are chosen from the leader's ethnic group, sometimes even directly from his family. Nepotism. Yep. These regimes based on the family unit seem to repeat the age-old laws of endogamy, and faced with this stupidity, this imposture, and this intellectual and spiritual poverty, we are left with a feeling of shame rather than anger. These heads of government are the true traitors of Africa, for they sell their continent to the worst of its enemies, stupidity. This sell this cell, their continent, sorry, this tribalization of power results much as one would expect in regionalist thinking and separatism. Decentralizing trends surface and triumph. The nation disintegrates and is dismembered. The leader who once cried African unity and thought of his own little family, awakes to find himself saddled with 5 tribes who also want their own ambassadors and ministers, and as irresponsible, obvious, and pathetic as ever, he cries treason. We have many times indicated the very often detrimental role of the leader. This because in certain regions, the party is organized like a gang whose toughest members takes over the leadership. The leader's ancestry and powers are readily mentioned. In an annoying and slightly admiring tone, it is quickly pointed out that he inspires awe and his close collaborators. In order to avoid these many pitfalls, a persistent battle has to be waged to prevent the party from becoming a compliant instrument in the hands of a leader. Leader comes from the English word to lead, meaning to drive in French. The driver of people no longer exists today. People are no longer a herd and none need to be driven. Exactly. There is no such thing as liberators. We are our own people who can liberate ourselves. There's no such thing as someone who's going to lead or liberate us. We are going to liberate ourselves. If the leader drives me, I want him to know that at the same time I am driving him. The nation should not be an affair ran by a big boss. Hence the panic that grips government circles every time one of their leaders falls ill, because they are obsessed with the question of succession. What will happen to the country if the leader dies? The influential circles who in their blind lifestyle, their cocktail parties, their paid travel, and their profitable racketeering have abdicated in favor of a leader and occasionally discovered the spiritual void at the heart of the nation. A country which really wants to answer to history, which wants to develop its talents and the minds of its inhabitants, must possess a genuine party. The party is not an instrument in the hands of the government. Very much to the country, the party is an instrument in the hands of the people. Right on. The party is the masses. They're one the same. Is the party which decides the policy enacted by the government. The party is not and never should be merely a political bureau where all the members of government and dignitaries of the regime feel free to, sorry for pausing, I'm reading from the actual book. Dignitaries of the regime feel free to the congregate. Alas, all too often is the party which makes up the entire political bureau and its members reside permanently in the capital. In an underdeveloped country, the leading party members should flee the capital like a plague. With the exception of a few, they should reside in the rural areas. Centralizing everything in the capital should be avoided. No administrative pretext can justify the bustle of the capital, already overpopulated and overdeveloped compared to the 9/10 of the territory. The party must be decentralized to the limits. This is the only way to receive regions that are dead, the regions that have not yet woken up to life. In practice, there will be at least one member of the political bureau in each region, and care should not be taken not to appoint him regional head. He will not handle administrative responsibilities. The member of the regional political bureau is not obliged to hold the highest rank in the regional administration. He should not necessarily join forces with the authorities. For the people, the party is not the authority, but the organization whereby the people, exert their authority and will. the less confusion there is, the less duality of powers, the more the party can fulfill its role as guide, and the more it will become a decisive guarantee for the people. If the party merges with the authorities, then this the fastest way for the party militant to achieve his selfish ends, obtain a job in the administration, be promoted, change his rank, and make a career for himself. Yep, revisionism and opportunism. In an underdeveloped country, the creation of dynamic regional bureaus halts the process of urban macrocephaly and the chaotic exodus of the rural masses towards the towns. The establishment during the very first days of independence of regional bureaus with the power to stimulate, revive, and accelerate the citizens' consciousness is an inevitable prerequisite for any country that wants to progress. Otherwise, the party leaders and dignitaries of the regime congregate around the leader. The administration swells out of all proportion, not because it is expanding or specializing, but because more cousins and more militants expect a position and hope to slip into the works. And the dream of every citizen is to reach the capital, to have his piece of the pie. The towns and villages are deserted. The unaided, uneducated, and untrained rural masses turn their backs on the unrewarding soil and set off for the urban periphery, swelling the lumpen proletariat out of all proportion. Another national crisis is looming. We believe, on the contrary, that the interior, the backcountry, should be given priority. In the last resort, moreover, we see no drawback to the government convening elsewhere besides the capital. The myth of the capital must be debunked, and the disinherited shown that the decision has been made to work in their interest. To a certain degree, this is what the Brazilian government attempted to do with Brasilia. The arrogance of Rio de Janeiro was an insult to the Brazilian people, but unfortunately, Brasilia is still a new capital, as monstrous as the other one. Its only advantage is that today a road has been built through the forest. No serious objection can be made to the choice of a new capital, to relocating the entire government to one of the most destitute regions, the nation inherited from the colonial period. And the underdeveloped countries, however, we must increase our contacts with the rural masses. Yep, we must apply a national policy, i.e., a policy specifically aimed at the masses. We must never lose contact with the people who fought for their independence and a better life. Instead of delving into their diagrams and statistics, indigenous civil servants and technicians should delve into the body of the population. They should not bristle every time there is a mention of an assignment into the interior, quote unquote. Yep. The labor aristocracy, which I assume is what he's referring to, should betray their class interests and struggle alongside and learn from the proletariat and the lumpen proletariat, the poor. One should no longer hear their young wives threaten to divorce their husbands if they cannot manage to avoid a rural posting. Hence, the party's political bureau should give priority to the disinherited regions, and the artificial and superficial life of the capital, grafted onto the natural reality like a foreign body, should occupy as small a place as possible in the life of the nation, which, on the contrary, is fundamental and sacred. If anyone else wants to read, they can.
I'll read. How much do you want me to read to? Which page?
Well, let me see. I want to see how far away we are. I want to see how far away we are from the next chapter.
Okay.
Let me see. Actually, we're not too far away. We are okay. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8,
Okay,
9, 10,
okay.
11, 12, 13, 14, 15. We're 15 pages away from the next
Wow.
chapter.
Okay, so should I read all of it or?
No.
Okay.
No, I'm not saying
Okay.
to read all of it.
Okay,
Maybe but since we're only 15 pages away, and since it's 15, maybe you could do like
5.
for instance, yeah. You could do
Okay.
5. Someone else could do 5, and someone else could do the remaining ones. If that's okay with everyone.
All right.
Yeah, that's cool, man.
Okay. In an underdeveloped country, the party must be organized in such a way that it is not content merely to stay in touch with the masses. The party must be the direct expression of the masses. The party is not an administration with the mission of transmitting government orders. It is the vigorous spokesman and the incorruptible defender of the masses. In order to arrive at this notion of party, we must first and foremost rid ourselves of the very Western, very bourgeois, and hence very disparaging idea that the masses are incapable of governing themselves. Experience has proven, in fact, that the masses must fully understand the most complex issues. Once the greatest service the Algerian Revolution has rendered to the Algerian intellectuals was to put them in touch with the masses, to allow them to see the extreme, unspeakable poverty of the people, and at the same time witness the awakening of their intelligence and the development of their consciousness. The Algerian people, the starved, illiterate mass of men and women who for centuries were plunged into incredible darkness, have resisted the tanks and planes, the napalm, and the psychological warfare, but above all, the corruption and the brainwashing, the traitors and the national armies of the general, what is that? General Ballonis. The Algerian people have stood firm in spite of their weak-minded, the fence setters, and the would-be dictators. The Algerian people have stood firm because their 7-year struggle has opened up spheres that they never even dreamed of. Today, arms factories open deep in the Jebel, several meters above underground. Today, people's tribunals function at every level, and local planning commissions carve up large agricultural estates and draw up the Algeria of tomorrow. An isolated individual can resist understanding an issue, but the group, the village, grasp it with disconcerting speed. Of course, if we choose to use a language comprehensible only to law and economic graduates, it'll be easy to prove that the masses need to have their own life run for them. But if we speak in plain language, if we are not obsessed with the perverse determination to confuse the issues and exclude the people, then it will be clear that the masses comprehend all the finer points in every artifice. Resorting to technical language means you are determined to treat the masses as uninitiated. Such language is the poor front for the lecturer's intent to deceive the people and leave them on the sidelines. Language endeavor to confuse is a mask behind which looms an even greater undertaking to dispossess. The intention is to strip people of their possessions as well as their sovereignty. You can explain everything to the people provided you really want to understand them to understand. And if you think that they can be dispensed with, that on the contrary, they would be more of a nuance to the smooth running of many private and limited companies whose aim is to push them further into misery, then there is no more to be said. Like sideline, like that's so true. Like if you just explain it to them in a common way, it's they have the ability to understand and to be sovereign.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's like
That's what Mao did.
Yeah,
That's literally what Mao did.
yeah. If you think you can perfectly govern a country without involving the people, if you think that their very presence, the people confuse the issue, then they are hindrance or through their inherent unconsciousness and undermining factor, then there should be no hesitation. The people must be excluded. Yet when the people are asked to participate in the government, instead of being a hindrance, they are a driving force. We Algerians, during the course of this war, have had the opportunity, the good fortune, and fully grasping the reality of a number of things. In some of the rural areas, the political military leaders of the revolution found themselves confronted with situations that required radical responses. We shall now address some of these situations. And in 1956 and 1957, French colonialism put certain zones off limits, and travel to these regions was strictly prohibited or regulated. The peasants were no longer able to travel freely into their town to buy fresh provisions. And during this period, the local grocers made huge profits in tea, coffee, sugar, tobacco, and salt reached exorbitant prices. And the black market flourished and became particularly brazen. And the peasants could not pay cash mortgage their crops. And even their land, or even carved up their family properties piece by piece. And the next resort was to work solely to pay their bills at the local grocers. As soon as the political commissioners realized the risks involved, they reacted immediately. Thank God. Consequently, a rational system of supplies was established. In town, the grocer was obligated to buy from the government wholesalers, who gave him an invoice detailing the price of the goods. And then when the retailers arrived back in the douar, he had first to report to the political commissioner, who checked the invoice and fixed the profit margin and set the selling price. And the resale prices were displayed in the shop as a member of the, am I saying that correctly, douar?
Yeah.
Okay. A kind of inspector was on hand to inform the fella of the exact price of the goods had to be sold. And the retailer, however, very quickly discovered a loophole, and after 3 or 4 days declared he had run out of stock. And he resumed his underhand dealings and continued selling on the black market. And the reaction by the political military authorities was immediate. Large fines were charged and the money collected was paid into the village coffers to refinance either charity works or works in the interest of the community. And in some cases, it was decided to close down the shop for a while. In the event of the second offense, the business was immediately taken over and run by the elected management committee. On condition, the former owner was paid a monthly allowance. On the basis of this experience, it was explained to the people how the laws of economic functioned. In taking concrete examples, the accumulation of capital turned from a theory into a very real and topical mode of behavior. And the people understood how the people understood how one can get rich from business and expanded. It was only then that the peasants recounted how their grocer lent them money at usurious rates, often recalled how he had driven them from their land and how they had gone from being landowners to laborers. And the more the people realized, or more the people understood, the more vigilant they became. And the more they realized, in fact, that everything depends on them. And their salvation lies in their solidarity. And recognizing their interest in identifying to their needs, the people understood that wealth is not the fruit of labor, but the spoils from an organized protection racket. The rich no longer seem respectable men, but flesh-eating beasts, jackals and ravens who wallow in the blood of the people. Moreover, the political commissioners had to rule that nobody would work for anyone else, and the land belonged to those who worked it. This is a principle with which through an information campaign has become a fundamental law of the Algerian Revolution. And the peasants who employs agricultural laborers had been obligated to distribute land shares to their former employees. The yield per acre was thus seen to triple, despite numerous raids and aerial bombardments by the French, as well as the difficulty of getting fertilizers. The fellows who were able to judge and see for themselves the produce they had harvested were eager to understand how it worked. And they were very quickly realized that work is not a simple notion. The slavery is the opposite of work, and that the work presupposes freedom, responsibility, and consciousness. I think that's really important. Sorry, but like that's like just giving,
Yep.
yeah, like the fruits of their labor and actually having some understanding of
Where it comes from, you know, it's beautiful, you know. And this right here, what he is talking about, this is how every single movement, how every single legitimate communist movement has succeeded. Because when the Bolshevik Revolution was a success, when the PRC was a success, why did they succeed? They didn't succeed because they were quote unquote more correct than everyone else. They didn't succeed because they didn't succeed because they had glorified book clubs. They succeeded because they connected with the masses, and they put that theory and that scientific analysis that they were talking about into practice. And
Yeah,
through that practice, they learned how to better it. And you
Okay.
better it by engaging with the masses. Sorry,
okay.
I'm going
I
off.
have
Like,
I have a quick question though. Okay, so who was the one when it says that when it was implemented that, okay, so the businesses that were, it's kind of like the company market, right? Like where
Mhm.
you're working and you're paying the company market and your check goes to them and it just becomes a vicious cycle.
Yep.
Who was imposing these regulations on the businesses is what my question is. Like they said that they were fined or they were shut down for a while. Like who was imposing that? Was that the government, or like doesn't really expand on that? Like,
Mhm.
because I'm wondering, how do you get to that
That's for the
point?
local bourgeoisies.
Okay,
The
Okay.
local bourgeoisies were doing that.
Yeah,
okay.
the
Yeah.
petty bourgeoisie.
They're actually not even bourgeoisies. They work for the bourgeoisies.
Hmm.
Okay,
It was a
Robert,
lo-
I saw Robert. I don't mean to stop reading, but it was just I felt that was a really important thing, and I saw Robert had his hand raised.
And you're entitled to that. You're entitled to that
Yep.
to get some understanding.
Yeah.
Hey,
The
we
intellectuals in the context of this story, the intellectuals are actually middle class people.
Okay. Yeah. Exactly. I noticed that too when
Yep.
as I read through it prior to this, that
the
it's like,
intellectuals. Oh, sorry.
yeah.
Oh no,
Yeah.
I was gonna say that they're usually labor aristocracy or petty bourgeois.
Okay. I saw Robert had his hand raised too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in the Irish Republican Revolution, they actually, one of the first things they did once they seized property and a fair amount of power was the establishment of citizens tribunals, and those were the bodies that made the decisions on what needed to be nationalized first. And there's always some members of the bourgeoisie that care about the working class because they have a lot of family members in the working class and they're totally cool with turning things over. But I guess these tribunals and then the People's Army are the ones who kind of enforced the redistribution of things like pretty early on,
Well.
as soon as
Yeah.
power was established.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You're right. You're absolutely right, because when you look at other struggles, like for instance, the Cuban struggle, Fidel Castro was a bourgeoisie. He comes from the bourgeoisie class.
Same thing with
and his family were bourgeoisies.
same thing with Che Guevara, because when Che
And
Guevara,
exactly.
I'm sorry, when Che Guevara
was
started,
another bourgeoisie.
he started as a labor aristocracy, or as petty bourgeoisie, and if he hadn't, if Che, and I tell this people all the time, and people need to understand this, if Che Guevara never betrayed his class interest, and had he never traveled around Latin America, if he just stayed in Buenos Aires, you know what he would have became? He would have became a petty bourgeois doctor. That's what he would have became. If he hadn't traveled around Latin America, he would have literally become a petty bourgeois doctor. And whenever I tell people that, they're surprised, but it's true, So yeah.
Yeah, he was. He was a petty bourgeois doctor. Yeah.
Yep. But yeah, I'm sorry for holiday. It's just that this conversation was getting really good. But if you want to continue reading, Comrade Kimberly, or if anyone else wants to read, yeah.
Joe said he'll read, so in the regions. Scroll down with the arrow. Yeah.
Okay. In the regions where we were able to conduct these enlightening experiments, where we witnessed the edification of man through revolutionary teachings, the pheasant clearly grasped the principle whereby the clearer the commitment, the better one works. We were able to convey to the masses that work is not a physical exercise or the working of certain muscles, but that one works more with one's brain and one's heart than with one's muscles and sweat. Likewise, it liberated regions cut off from the former distribution channels. We had to modify productions which previously were geared solely toward the towns and exports. We established production for consumption by the people and the units of the National Liberation Army. We quadrupled the production of lentils. Let me see, how do I go down?
Right here.
And organizing the making of charcoal. Green vegetables and charcoal were shipped from the northern region to the south over the mountains, while the southern zone sent meat to the north. It was the FLN, the Front de la Liberación Nacional, who decided on this coordination and established the communication systems. We did not have technicians or experts from the leading universities of the West, but in the liberal regions,
The Daily.
yes, she put her finger or her hand in front of it and they threw me out. The daily ration reached to the hitherto unheard of figure of 3,200 calories. The people were not content merely to celebrate their victory. They asked theoretical questions. For example, why did certain regions never see an orange before the War of Liberation, whereas thousands of tons were shipped abroad annually? Why had so many Algerians never seen grapes, whereas millions of grapes were dispatched for the enjoyment of Europeans? Today, the people have a very clear notion of what belongs to them. The Algerian people now know they are the sole proprietors of their country's soil and subsoil, excuse me. And if some cannot understand the FLN's relentless refusal to tolerate any infringement on the ownership of the free determination not to accept any compromise on principles, then everyone should remember that the Algerian people are now adult, responsible, and conscious. In short, the Algerian people are proprietors. We have taken the Algerian example to clarify our discourse, not to glorify our own people, but quite simply to demonstrate the importance part of the struggle has played in achieving consciousness. Obviously, other peoples have achieved the same results through other methods. We are not in a better position today to know that the confrontation in Algeria was inevitable. Excuse me, I get confused sometimes, but other
worry.
regions have
No,
led their people to the same results through political struggle and information campaigns by the party. In Algeria, we understand that the masses were fully prepared for the problem which they were confronted. In a underdeveloped country, experience proves that the important point is not that 300 people understand and decide, but that all understand and decide, even if it takes twice or 3 times as long. In fact, the time taken to explain the time lost, humanizing the worker, will be made up in the execution. People must know where they are going and why. The politicians should be aware that the future will remain bleak as long as the people's consciousness remains rudimentary, primary, and opaque. We African politicians have very clear ideas about our people's situation, but this lucidity must remain deeply dialectical. The awakening of the peoples as a whole will not be achieved overnight. Their rational commitment to the task of building the nation will be simple and straightforward. First of all, because the methods of channels of communication are still in the development stages. Secondly, because the sense of time must no longer be that of the moment or the next harvest, but rather on the rest of the world. And finally, because the demoralization buried deep within the mind of colonialization is still very much alive. But we should be aware that victory over the pockets of the least resistance, the legacy of the material and spiritual domination of the country, is a requisite that no government can escape. Let us take the example of work under the colonial regime. The colonists never stopped complaining about that the native was slow. Today, in certain independent countries, we heard leaders take up the same complaint. What the colonists really wanted was for the slave to be full of enthusiasm through a kind of mystification constituting the highest form of alienation. He sought to convince the slave that the land he was working belonged to him, and the mines where he was losing his health were his property. The colonists forgot, strangely enough, that he was getting rich on the agony of the slave. In fact, what the colonist was saying to the colonized subject was, work yourself to death, but let me get rich. Today, we should proceed differently. We must not say to the people, work yourself to death, but let the country get rich.
Mm-hmm.
If we want to increase the gross national income, reduce the imports of certain useless, even harmful products, improve agriculture production and flight literacy, we have to conduct an information campaign. The people must understand what is at stake. Public business must be the business of the public. We arrive, therefore, at the need to increase the number of local cells amongst the rank and file. All too often, we are content with establishing national bodies such as the Women's Union, the Youth Movement, and the labor unions at the top and never outside the Capitol. But if we venture to investigate behind the offices of the Capitol, in the Capitol, if we go through to the back room where the records are meant to be, we are
Aghast.
aghast. I don't know that word. We are aghast at the void, the emptiness, and the bluff. We need a foundation, cells that provide substance and dynamism.
Dynamism.
The masses must be able to meet, discuss, put forward suggestions, and receive instructions. Citizens have the opportunity to speak, to express themselves, and innovate.
This
The
right
meeting of
here.
the local
sorry.
cell. Okay, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say this right here that he's describing. That's democratic centralism. That's what I want to say.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. I'll just finish reading right here, and then if somebody else wants to take over. It says, the meeting of the local cell or the committee meeting is a liturgical act. It is privileged opportunity for the individual to listen and speak. At every meeting, the brain multiplies. The association of ideas and the eye discovers a wide human panorama. If somebody would like to take on reading, or I can continue on. Want to be fair.
I do not mind reading if no one else, if that's okay with everyone. We are only, let me count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We're only 9 pages away.
Well, I don't mind reading a few more if nobody else
No,
minds.
No, it's
Yeah,
okay.
finish her off, Joe. I like your reading.
Hell yeah. Wait. I lost the page number on my physical book. Wait, I need to find it again.
And it starts, we left off at the high percentage of young people.
I'd like to point out at this section, I think something that I noticed growing up in the Bible Belt is that with a lot of working class people, the church they go to is the only nice room that they enter in a given week.
Yep.
A lot of poor working class people live in very shabby, moldy places. And when they go to church, a lot of times it's like, oh, this is our shared castle. This is our shared community space. And even, some of the mega churches, it seems both silly and ridiculous to those of us that really know how they're being used. But I like the fact that these cell groups are something that that give that piece of immediacy and community, because one of the things that the fascists did in America was they exploited that religious cell network, because a lot of churches, before they became radicalized, these were places where people would go to get shared goods for a food bank and clothing bank and to share their emotions and to have a chance to get stuff off the chest and seek counsel and to testify to this or that,
But they were co-opted.
And I think definitely one of the biggest serve the people programs could be getting people's assemblies going that are eclectic and give people a chance to really feel that kind of emotional interconnectedness, you know. That's all I got to say. Yeah.
Hmm. No, yeah, you're 100% right, comrade, Dr. Rob. 100%. You know, the whole point of building community and the whole point of radicalization is to take all the scattered ideas of our community, all of the needs, and transform them into organized acts. You know, it's to transform them into actual actions and actually revolutionary activities and party activities to radicalize and educate and agitate the masses. You know, so yeah, you know, a place to just have people to talk, to let out their emotions, to hear their ideas and to further build that solidarity that's needed in general. You know, especially for our mental health and to feel that sense of community, because we're all social creatures, you know, and that sense of community can really build the toughest of bonds. So yeah.
Mm.
And if you like, I can continue reading.
Sure.
All right. The high percentage of young people in the underdeveloped countries poses specific problems for the government that must be addressed lucidly. The idle and often illiterate urban youth is exposed to all kinds of disturbing influences. Youth in the underdeveloped countries is, in most cases, marketed entertainment from the industrialized countries. As a rule, there is some correlation between the mental and material level of a society at the leisure activities it provides. In the underdeveloped countries, however, the young generation has access to entertainment device for the youth. And the capitalist countries, detective stories, slot machines, hardcore photos, pornographic literature, R-rated films, and above all, alcohol. In the West, the family environment, school, and the relatively high standard of living of the working masses serve as a kind of bulwark against the harmful effects in the entertainment. But in an African country where intellectual development is unequal, where the violent clash of two worlds has had seriously shaken up the old traditions and disrupted ways of thinking. The affectability and the sensitivity of the young African are at the mercy of the aggression contained in the Western culture. His family very often proves incapable of counteracting the violence with stability and homogeneity. Homogeneity? I think, how did I
You got
pronounce?
it. You got it. Homogeneity.
Yeah, homogeneity. Okay, I haven't read that word for a while, so please excuse that, and I'll
Yeah,
continue reading.
those are words that we don't use every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's a T in there. So like I think it's homogeneity or something like that.
I believe you're correct in that.
Homogeneity.
Homogeneity, yeah, something like that. I don't know. It's it's definitely easier to pronounce than fucking Novidier or whatever the fuck. Jesus. But anyways, continue, comrade Joe.
And continuing, it goes on to say, in this area, the government must serve as filter and stabilizer. The commissioners for youth in the underdeveloped countries frequently make one mistake. They see their role as equivalent to that of the commissions for youth in the developed countries. They talk about fortifying the soul, developing the body, and encouraging talent in sports. In our opinion, they should be wary of such ideas. The youth of the underdeveloped country is often an idle youth. It must first all be occupied. This is why the commissioner for the youth must report to the Ministry for Labor. The Ministry for Labor, which is a requirement for an underdeveloped country, works in close collaboration with the Ministry for the Planning. Another requirement, and the underdeveloped country, the youth of Africa should not be oriented toward the stadiums, but towards the fields and the schools. The stadium is not an urban showpiece, but a rural space that is cleared, worked, and often to the nation. offered to the nation. The capitalist notion of sports is fundamentally different from that which should exist in an underdeveloped country. The African politicians should not be concerned with producing professional sportsmen, but conscious individuals who also practice sports. If sports are not incorporated into the life of the nation, in the building of the nation, if we produce national sportsmen instead of conscious individuals, then sports will quickly be ruined by professionalism and commercialism. Don't we see that today?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I'll just go ahead to the page 138, and if somebody else wants to take on. A sport should not be the game of entertainment for the urban bourgeoisie. Our greatest task is to constantly understand what is happening in our own countries. We must not cultivate the spirit of the exceptional or look for the hero, another form of leader. We must elevate the people, expand their minds, equip them,
Differentiate.
differentiate them, and humanitize them.
Yep. Beautifully said. I love that. That quote right there, I fucking love that.
Okay, I'll
Um,
read the rest.
All right.
Once again, we turn to the obsession that we would like to see shared by every African politician. The need to shed light on the people's effort to rehabilitate work and rid it of its historical opacity. To be responsible in an underdeveloped country is to know that everything finally rests on educating the masses, elevating their minds, and on what is all too quickly assumed to be political education. It is commonly thought with criminal flippancy that to politicize the masses means from time to time haranguing them with major political speech. It is thought that for a leader or head of a state to speak on major current issues in a pandemic tone of voice is sufficient as obligation to publicize the masses, politicize the masses. But political education means opening up the mind. That's what it means. Awakening the mind and introducing it to the world. It is a society said, it is as society said to invent the soul of men. To politicize the masses is not and cannot be to make a political speech. It means driving home to the masses that everything depends on them. That if we stagnate the fort, the fort is theirs, and that if we progress, they too are responsible. Mao said that, and that there is no demurge, no illustrious man taking responsibility for everything, but that the demurge is the people, and the magic lies in their hands and in their hands alone. In order to achieve such things, in order to actually embody them, we must, as we have already mentioned, decentralize to the utmost. The flow of ideas from the upper echelon to the rank and file and vice versa must be an unswerving principle, not for merely formal reason, but quite simply because adherence to this principle is a guarantee of salvation. It is the forces from the rank and file which rise up to energize the leadership, permitted dialectically to make a new leap forward. Let me see. Once again, we Algerians very quickly understood this. For no member of the upper echelons have been able to take precedence in any mission of salvation. It is the rank and file which fights in Algeria, and they are fully aware that without the difficult and heroic daily struggle, the upper echelons would collapse, just as they are aware that without the upper echelons and the leadership, the rank and file will disintegrate into chaos. You see the relationship between the upper and the top and the lower? And
Yep.
how the power structure draws its validity. It's just like saying that the workers cannot live without the capitalists, and the capitalists cannot live without the workers. The power structure draws its validity and strength solely from the existence of the people's struggle. In practice, it is the people who choose a power structure of their own free will, and not the power structure that suffers the people.
Exactly.
The masses must realize that the government and the party are at their service. A people worth of esteem, example, conscious of their dignity, is a people who never forget this obvious fact. During the colonial occupation of during the colonial occupation of the people were told that they had to sacrifice their lives for the sake of dignity. But the African people quickly realized that it was not only the occupier who threatened their dignity. The African people quickly realized that dignity and sovereignty were exact equivalents. And in fact, a free people living in dignity is a sovereign people.
Mm-hmm.
A people living in dignity is a responsible people. And there is no point demonstrating that the African people are infantile or retarded. A government and a party get the people they deserve. A government and a party get the people they deserve. And in the more or less long term, a people gets the government it deserves. The above arguments are brought out by actual experience in certain regions. It sometimes occurs during a meeting that a militant answer to a difficult problem is all we need to do is this voluntary shortcut, which dangerously combines spontaneity, simplistic syncretism, and little intellectual elaboration, frequently wins the day. Every time we encounter this abdication of responsibility in the militant, it is not enough to say he is wrong. He has to be made responsible, encouraged to follow through his chain of reasoning to its conclusion, and taught to grasp the often atrocious, inhumane, and finally sterile nature of this. All you, all you need, all you need to do is. Everybody has a monopoly on truth, neither the leader nor the militant. The search for truth in local situations is the responsibility of the community. Some militants have a broader experience, are quicker to gather their thoughts, and in the past have succeeded in making a greater number of inferences. But they should avoid overshadowing the people for the what happened? For the okay, thank you.
Comrade Che.
That's
Comrade
okay.
Che.
That's okay, Carl.
All
Successful
right.
outcome of any decision depends on the conscious, coordinated commitment of the people as a whole. We are all in the same boat. Everybody will be slaughtered or tortured, and within the context of the independent nation, everyone will suffer the same hunger and marasmus. The collective struggle presupposes a collective responsibility from the rank and file and a colloquial responsibility at the top. Yes, everyone must be involved in the struggle for the sake of common salvation. There are no clean hands, no innocent bystanders. We are all in the process of dirtying our hands in the quagmire of our soil and the terrifying void of our minds. Any bystander is a coward or a traitor. The duty of a leadership is to have the masses on their side. Any commitment, however, presupposes awareness and understanding of the mission to be accomplished. In short, a rational analysis, no matter how embryonic. The people should not be mesmerized, swayed by emotion, or confused. Only underdeveloped countries led by revolutionary elite emanating from the people can today empower the masses to step into the stage of history. But once again, on the condition that we vigorously and decisively reject the formation of a national bourgeoisie, a caste of privileged individuals, to politicize the masses, to make the nation in its totality a reality for every citizen, to make the experience of a nation, the experience of every citizen. As President ch3 so aptly reminded us in his address to the Second Congress of African Writers. In the realm of thought, man can claim to be the brain of the world, but in reality, where every action affects spiritual and physical being, the world still the brain of mankind. For it is here that are concentrated the totality of powers and elements of thought, the dynamic forces of development and improvement. And it's here too that energies are merged and the sum total of mass intellectual values is finally inscribed. Since individual experience is national, it is a link in the national chain. It ceases to be individual, narrow and limited in scope, and can lead to the truth of the nation and the world. Just as every fighter clung to the nation during the period of armed struggle, so during the period of nation building, every citizen must continue in his daily purpose to embrace the nation as a whole, to embody the constantly dialectical truth of the nation, and to be here and now the triumph of man in his totality. If the building of a bridge does not enrich the consciousness of those working on it, then don't build the bridge and let the citizen continue to swim across the river or use a ferry. That's how good logic. The bridge must not be pitchfork or fostered upon the social landscape by a Deus ex machina, but on the contrary, must be the product of citizens' brains and muscles. And there's no doubt, architecture and engineers and foreigners for the most part will probably be needed, but the local party leaders must see to it that the techniques seep into the desert of the citizen's brain so that the bridge in its entirety and in every detail can be integrated, redesigned, and reappropriated. The citizen must appropriate the bridge. Then and only then everything is possible. A government that proclaims itself national must take responsibility for the entire nation. And in underdeveloped countries, the youth represents one of the most important sectors. The consciousness of the younger generation must be elevated and enlightened. It is the younger generation that will compose the national army. If they have been adequately informed, if the national youth movement has done its work of integrating the youth into the nation, then the mistake that have compromised, even undermined the future of Latin American republics would not have been avoided. Would have been avoided. The army is never a school for war, but a school for civics, a school for politics. The soldier in a mature nation is not a mercenary, but a citizen who defends the nation by the use of arms. That is why it is paramount that the soldier knows who he is at the service of this country and that of an officer. However illustrious he may be, military and civilian national service must be used to raise the level of national consciousness, to detribalize and unify. In an underdeveloped country, the mobilization of men and women should be undertaken as quickly as possible. The underdeveloped country must take precaution not to perpetrate feudal traditions that give priority to men over women. Women shall be given equal importance to men, not in the articles of the Constitution, but in daily life, at the factory, in the schools, in the assemblies, even in bed. If the countries of the West station their soldiers in barracks, this does not mean this is the best solution. We are not obliged to militarize recruits. National service can be civilian or military, and in any case, every able body should be able to join his fighting unit at a moment notice to defend the freedom of the nation and its civil liberties. The major public works projects of national interest should be carried out by the recruits. This is a highly effective way of stimulating stagnant regions and getting the greatest number of citizens to learn of the country's realities. We should avoid transforming the army into an autonomous body that sooner or later, idle and aimless, will go into politics and threaten the authority. By dint of haunting the corridors of power, armchair general dream of pronunciamientos. The only way of avoiding this is to politicize the army, to nationalize it. Likewise, there is an urgent need to strengthen the militia. In the event of war, it is the entire nation which fights or works. There should be no professional soldiers, and the number of career officers should be kept to a minimum. First of all, because very often the officers are selected from university graduates who will be much more useful elsewhere. An engineer is 1,000 times more indispensable to the nation than an officer. And secondly, because any hint of a caste consciousness should be eliminated. We have seen in the preceding pages how nationalism, that magnificent which arouse the masses against the oppressor, disintegrates in the aftermath of independence. Nationalism is not a political doctrine, but it's a program. If we really want to safeguard our countries from regression, paralyze, or collapse, we must rapidly switch from a national consciousness to a social and political consciousness. The nation can only come into being in a program elaborated by a revolutionary leadership and enthusiastically and lucidity approached by the masses. The national effort must be constantly situated in the general context of the underdeveloped countries. The front line against hunger and darkness. The front line against poverty and stunted consciousness must be present in the minds and muscles of the men and women. The work of the masses, their determination to conquer the scourges that for centuries have excluded them from the history of human mind, must be connected to the work and determination of all the underdeveloped people. There is, wait a minute, my eyes are starting to get wetty. There is a kind of collective endeavor, a common destiny among the underdeveloped masses. The people of the third world.
Comrade Che, if you want, I could read if your eyes are getting too watery.
Yeah, they are.
You want me to read it?
Yes, please.
All right. The peoples of the third world are not underdeveloped, are not interested in news about King Baudouin's wedding or the affairs of the Italian bourgeoisie. When we want to hear our case histories in Argentina or Burma about the fight against illiteracy or the dictatorial behavior of other leaders. This is the material that inspires us, educates us, and greatly increases our effectiveness. As we have seen, a government needs a program if it really wants to liberate the people politically and socially. Yep, an ideological and political line. Not only an economic program, but also a policy on the distribution of wealth and social relations. Yep. In fact, there must be a concept of man, a concept of the future of mankind, which means that no sermon, no complicity with the former occupier can replace a program. The people, at first unenlightened and then increasingly lucid, will vehemently demand such a program. The Africans and the underdeveloped peoples, contrary to what is commonly believed, are quick to build a social and political consciousness. The danger is that very often they reach the stage of social consciousness before reaching the national phase. In this case, the underdeveloped countries' violent calls for social justice are combined, paradoxically enough, with an often primitive tribalism. The underdeveloped peoples behave like a starving population, which means that the days of those who treat Africa as their playground are strictly numbered. In other words, their power cannot last forever. A bourgeoisie that has only nationalism to feed the people fails in the mission and inevitably gets tangled up in a series of trials and tribulations. If nationalism is not explained, enriched, and deepened, if it does not very quickly turn into a social and political consciousness, into humanism, then it leads to a dead end. A bourgeois leadership of the underdeveloped countries confines the national consciousness to a sterile formulation. Only the massive commitment by men and women to judicious and productive tasks gives form and substance to this consciousness. It is then that flags and government buildings cease to be the symbols of the nation. The nation deserts the false glitter of the capital and takes refuge in the interior where it receives life and energy. The living expression of the nation is the collective consciousness in motion of the entire people. It is the enlightened and coherent praxis of men and women. The collective forging of a destiny implies undertaking responsibility on a truly historical scale. Otherwise, there is anarchy, repression, the emergence of tribalized parties and federalism, etc. If the national government wants to be national, it must govern by the people and for the people, for the disinherited and by the disinherited. No leader, whatever his worth, can replace the will of the people. And a national government, before concerning itself with international prestige, must first restore dignity to all citizens, furnish their minds, fill their eyes with human things, and develop a human landscape for the sake of its enlightened and sovereign inhabitants. Wow, that was fucking awesome, man. I fucking love that. The way he writes, it's like poetry. I fucking love it. I'm sure everyone has a lot to say. I especially want to hear what Dr. Rob and what Comrade Rob Rich have to say, since I think it's the first time that Comrade Rob Rich has been here with us. But in general, I want to hear what everyone has to say about this. Does anyone?
Rich, you there?
Yeah, Comrade Rob
Okay.
Rich. Sorry.
I don't. Is Robert Rich on here? I'm Robert Strong.
Yeah, I'm laying down.
But I don't
He's
hear
laying down
from-
with
I
the
don't hear him.
baby. He's laying down with the baby.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Yeah, this is. I mean, it's very. It's such an incredibly written book. It's definitely dense.
It is.
He was an academic as well as a revolutionary, but he was the real deal. It's cool to see an analysis breaking down the steps of nation building after the revolution. That's I'm glad we're reading it. That's all I gotta say.
Exactly. The thing that I want to put emphasis on is what he was saying about building up the people. Because a true vanguard party, a true proletarian party, is not one person's party. It's not a small group's party. It's the people's party. It's a tool for the people, by the people, and to the people. It is a tool for them to enact their own liberation, their own self-determination, and to build and expand and grow into what their society wants to be for their benefit, not for the benefit of some small ruling class or of one person and that whole great man theory bullshit, but for the people. You know, and the way you radicalize the people, the way you build class consciousness, the way you empower the people is not by giving them glorified book clubs. It's not by it's not by confusing them with big talk. It's by meeting them at their level and building off of what they know. It is by showing them that the Vanguard Party is for them. It's by building that connection. It is by providing for their materialistic needs, for their materialistic conditions, and showing them that there is a possibility for better, for showing them that the Vanguard Party is for them as to why this is important. And once they see what's in it for them, once they see that this works, they will fall in the ideological and political line of the Vanguard Party. Once they have educated, once they have participated through observation, then they themselves will engage in class agitation, then they will engage in organization, then they will engage in applying a scientific and Marxist analysis of our materialistic conditions and how to implement that analysis through praxis, through organizing, through revolution, and to reach those strategic stages with the people. You know, because the Vanguard Party is the spearhead, you know, and masses are the body of the spear. The spearhead, all the spearhead does is give direction and is give direction and precision. But the body of the spear, the masses, the body of the spear is what gives the spearhead the power, the energy, the force to move forward and to destroy and to destroy its enemies that lay in front of it. You know, without the body of the spearhead is just a piece of metal. But if you combine the body of the spear with the spearhead, then you get a people's army. Then you get the masses. Then you get a force that is unshakable in the face of the forces of reaction. And yeah, hope that wasn't too long.
You know, colonized people have always lived in fear.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they have always, because of colonialism and how colonialism has affected them in more ways than one,
Mm-hmm.
they have always, they couldn't look, they couldn't do this and see themselves inside. They had to see themselves outside of themselves, you know. And I think that Frantz Fanon was a very, very, well, he was a doctor, first of all.
Yep.
But he was also a very professional revolutionary.
Yep.
You know,
He was a revolutionary intellectual, just like Karl Marx.
exactly, and the rest of them.
Yep.
But he, you know, he wrote that book with the intention of educating his people meaning African people, you know, and to get them to see, damn, man, listen, you are oppressed, man. You got to do something about your oppression. Because sometimes colonized people don't even realize how oppressed they are until somebody brings it to their attention. It's just like Puerto Ricans, man. You know, Puerto Ricans are the same way. They are colonized people in Puerto Rico, you know, very colonized. They always, when the Puerto Rican Day Parade comes, they're all flashing their flags and all that stuff on Fifth Avenue, but they don't even know what the fuck they doing. They don't even know it's flashing the Puerto Rican flag. Don't they know that in 1937, you know, anyone that flashed a Puerto Rican flag in Puerto Rico was given 20 years in jail? They don't know that, do they? Yeah, 20 years.
They're brainwashed.
A portraitist, what's his name? Francisco Matos Paoli. They went to his house in 1937. 1937, they went to his house looking for arms, and because he was a national, he was a Puerto Rican national, he was a revolutionary with Albizu Campo, and they looked for everything. They couldn't find nothing, no guns, no nothing, but they found a nomination. They found the Puerto Rican flag, and it was based on that Puerto Rican flag that they gave him 20 years in prison because they said that that was seditious.
Damn.
You know, so you could imagine that piece is a lot enough compared to now, where a lot of Puerto Ricans don't even know who the fuck they are.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they don't even know if they're Puerto Ricans or Americans.
That's saddening.
Many of them say they're Americans, but if you look at it real deeply, you know, when the United States invaded Puerto Rico, you know, they made Puerto Indians Native Americans, or I should say, yeah,
Indigenous
Native,
people.
huh?
Sorry,
What
what?
was that? What was that?
Taínos.
Taínos.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I like
Yep.
that.
Yep, Dinos.
They made the Taínos, which, you know, because Taínos is actually a combination of African, Spanish, and Taínos. That's what the Puerto Rican people come out of. You know, they came out of that because during
Mm-hmm.
when Spain was in full force, many Taínos fled to the mountains, and many Africans fled to the mountains, and a few Spaniards, they fled to the mountains too, and they all combined, and out of that combination, the Puerto Rican nation was born. You know, but even Puerto Ricans don't even know their own history. Our history is so distorted that we don't even know what the fuck is happening. You know,
It's colonized. It's whitewashed.
colonized, and it's the same thing with the Algerians, the same situation, and that's why my man was so he was educating people. He was an educator. He was telling the Algerians, wake up, man, it's time to fight. That's basically what he was saying. When you look at it, wake up, it's time to fight, but you got to really fight the right way. Just don't fight. You know, there's a way of fighting.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and you know, and in the long run, it boils down to one thing: socialism.
Mm-hmm. Yep. You know.
The proletarian revolution. You know what I'm
Yep.
saying?
Yep. Literally. You
It
know.
boils down to the proletarian revolution.
I like.
But
I like your. I like what you're saying, Comrade Shay.
you know, I was reading today. Listen, I want to know something because I'm very curious, man.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna ask you, Conrad, Gabby,
All right.
what you know about damn, man, I forgot his name already.
Is it by any chance Jose Marti or no?
No. He was running. He was with Lenin.
Stalin, Trotsky. Oh,
Stalin. They claimed that Stalin people went out to Mexico and killed them.
okay. So, so I don't want to take away too much from like the book reading, but to kind of give like a short description of what I know. Basically, Trotsky went to yeah, that's what his name was. Trotsky went to Mexico to flee from the Bolsheviks because he betrayed the Bolsheviks and he aligned with the fascists, and he fled to Mexico.
Was
And
he
if I
really?
remember,
Was he really a traitor? Because
yeah, he was. Yeah, he was. He was a traitor. He was a traitor to the Bolshevik Revolution. What had happened was, as he was writing in his room, the story goes that Chicano came into his house and killed him with a pickaxe. Like he slammed the pickaxe at the side of his brain. And that's how he died. Yeah. That's how the story goes. But anyways, I really want to hear what y'all. I really want to hear what everyone here has to say about this chapter. You know, Comrade Joe, Kimberly, both Robs, so there can only be one true Rob. I'll hear what y'all have to say, Sister Zen, and so on.
I just had a commentary on the shit with Trotsky, because, you know, traitory was, gotta give a little credit where credit is due. The motherfucker fought the guy off with the pickaxe in his fucking head. He was
I was gonna make a joke. He was just picking his brain.
It's funny. It's funny because the ironic part of it is that Trotsky became a fascist, but ironically enough, he wrote a book critiquing fascism that's actually pretty good, which I find ironic. From what I hear, he actually wrote a pretty good book about critiquing fascism. I forgot what it was called, but it's actually a pretty decent book. I haven't read it, but I'm planning on reading it because apparently it's good. But yeah, I just find it hilarious that he critiqued fascism, yet he became a fascist. I find that funny.
Why is it that Stalin found him to be a fascist, to be a traitor, and Lenin, he always worked with Lenin?
No, I'm pretty sure Lenin only pretended to like care about him. If I remember correctly, Lenin actually found Trotsky very fucking annoying, if I remember correctly.
Well, the actual act he was convicted for with the charges for being a traitor was going against democratic centralism.
Mm-hmm.
Democratic centralism. You sure that it was democratic centralism, or was it a permanent revolution or something like that?
No, okay. So Trotsky, what ended up happening was that Trotsky was extremely idealistic, right? So in his mind, Trotsky thought that the only way communism could be achieved is if every single country and every single nation in the world had a revolution at the same time. That's how he thought communism could be achieved.
That's what he called permanent revolution.
Yeah, exactly. That's what he thought, but obviously, that's fucking ridiculous, and that would never fucking happen, because each country has their own unique materialistic conditions, and how revolution happen in those countries will happen in different times in different ways depending on their materialistic conditions, So Trotsky was a revisionist. He betrayed the Bolsheviks. His idea of how revolution would go would be completely different. And the thing about Trotsky, right, is that when the Bolsheviks won and when the Bolsheviks killed the Tsarist, Trotsky actually wanted the Bolsheviks to somehow make Germany socialist. Trotsky wanted the Bolsheviks to head over to Germany and help the communists there in order to make Germany communist. But like Lenin was like, no, we need to build our country first and become economically and socially stable before we even help any other communist movements everywhere. And they had that schism and that disagreement with one another.
I'm still not convinced that didn't deserve an ice pick, though. That's just me.
We haven't changed no subject. We're still on the same subject, because what was happening in Nigeria was what's happened in Germany and Russia and all that was happening in Africa in many ways, in many forms. You had traders also in Africa, that went against the revolution.
Yep, revisionists, opportunists, and so on and so forth.
That were trying to overthrow the revolution as well. So when we speak of Trotsky and Lenin, everything is interrelated.
Yep, everything is connected. Yeah. But yeah, Trotsky was something else, honestly. If I I need to build my But anyways, I'm sorry. You were saying something, Dr. Rob. I heard you were talking. Sorry.
Oh no, I was just saying that I'm still not sure that difference of opinion deserved an ice pick, but
right.
I don't know. I'd save the ice picks for the people who really, really need it. Who very clearly are passionate. Trotsky did a hell of a lot of fighting. He was
a good general. He was a very good general.
Yeah.
So,
I want to hear some more people's thoughts on this France chapter, though.
Yep.
I wanted to share one of the things that stood out to me most is the land is for those who work the land.
Mm-hmm.
And we implement that here in Aslan also. And we feel that. And I know a lot of our neighboring relatives feel that within their indigenous tribes, and even the Africans wanting 5 states in the South and creating their own nation, which I'm for.
Hell yeah. You
But,
know,
well,
I'm sorry.
well, let me finish real quick. And another interesting point that I thought is and I believe they're talking in Algeria, the trade from the North and the South, kind of like a lot of indigenous peoples have traded. And I think we touched this on yesterday's meeting.
Yep. Ojibwa warrior.
Yeah. The trade routes from all Turtle Island, and that's what I was like, whoa, and they caught it, and they were doing it over there too. So when they were trying to and then another thing, it reminded me of when they were saying the company store, a lot of coal miners in the Appalachians and whatnot, they even have a song like, I owe my soul to the company store. So I thought that was pretty important. But how that kind of like, I always look at it, whatever I'm learning, and whoever I'm learning from, how can I apply it to my peoples?
Exactly.
Even though I'm a people's people.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the things the Rainbow Coalition is built of
For the people.
For the people, and always for the people. But I just wanted to take those takes on that chapter really like stood out to me. And that's all I had to say. Anyone else?
No, yeah. Anyone else can speak. I just wanted to add a little thing. Comrade Joe, you were talking about how they wanted to form 5 nations, correct? Or 5 countries?
5 states. 5 states
Yeah,
in the South.
yeah. 5 states. I just want to add to that as well that Stalin, not a lot of people know this, but Stalin, Stalin rooted for and was in support for the creation of the Black Belt, where Black people across the southern part of the U.S. Had their own country. So yeah, I just want to add that as well. He advocated for that.
Yeah, I'm not sure on. I don't want to quote the 5 states, but I do believe it's Georgia,
Mississippi.
Mississippi. Che, because you go on that study group with me too.
Mississippi, Georgia,
Missouri.
yeah. Let me see, North Carolina, and one more, I think.
Georgia.
Georgia, yeah, Georgia is one of them. Georgia, Mississippi, North Carolina.
Is it Tennessee?
Missouri. Missouri.
I was gonna say Tennessee also, with Memphis and all that also.
Yeah, well, Tennessee, because it's is largely populated by Blacks. So yeah, they're looking at it as the most populated states in the nation. They want that to utilize that to take it to the United Nations, and let the United Nations make that decision, about Black people having their own land.
Country.
See, but that's going to create a lot of problems. That's going to create a lot of problems because,
the U.S. would never allow that. The U.S. would never allow that. It would never.
Well, not only the U.S., but you see, that creates contradictions within the movement itself overall. Not only Blacks, the Black movement, but it creates a lot of other contradictions with other movements as well, who are striving for not 5 states, but I mean, Marxist Leninists as an example, we're not striving for that. We striving, man, to overthrow the state, and also to build, in addition, a socialist government.
Mhm.
So a socialist government, where that's gonna fit in, if we have to be called like this, with the 5 states, let's say. So that creates a lot of problems, man. I don't know. I get confused even think about that. It creates a lot of problems.
I can understand that too, because we gotta take into consideration, those were indigenous lands
Exactly.
to begin with,
Mhm.
right? Before they were colonized. And do I have an agreement that there should be an allocated area for them to run and take empowerment of
Communities.
their communities? I agree with that. But yeah, like Ches says, that's a hard one to battle. But you know what? We are revolutionists, so
Mhm. Revolution is all about solving problems,
so
It's about solving contradictions.
yeah.
Well,
So
I know that in the
here's the struggle.
long run, that's gonna be resolved.
Yeah,
But just keep in mind that there's another portion of black people, who are saying that they want to build an African state right here in the United States. A new Africa.
well,
Now,
yeah. That's the way they term it, a new Africa. And I don't, you can't. That's not gonna happen.
Yeah.
But
You can't.
do I believe you could take control of your, if you guys are
Communities.
already the masses in certain global regions? Well, then you damn right, you have every right to take control.
Mhm.
Just like I also am a part of El Partido de la Raza Unida party, our own separate political party. And we're working to free Aslan. So it's very similar to what we're trying to do in the Southwest, that they're trying to do back down south. So I don't know. But like I said, those are my revolutionary thoughts. And well, I try to study and stay in tune with all I can, because that's when we're working with the masses. Well, we got to know what's going on within the masses. We
see,
can't say we're a part of a rainbow coalition when we ain't collating with anyone but our local communities.
Yep.
That's
It's
all.
intercommunal,
there's a difference when we here in this group and we say power to the people, but in other areas we don't say power to the people. We say free the land.
Right. You're correct on that. Free the land, free the land, free the land. But then you go back into, like I always rephrase too, with the indigenous people, land back. So
Mhm.
land back is different from free the land and
Decolonization.
decolonization in specific regional areas. So I don't know anybody's take on that. I see Robert over there and I see Che over there. Let me be quiet for a little bit. I want to be
Let me say
enlightened.
this before I pass it over to the other brother. There's 2 people in this country that need to sit down with each other and discuss exactly what is going to happen. Those are the indigenous people and African people. Those 2 people need to sit down with each other and seriously discuss what the hell is going to happen.
That's
Because even though indigenous people have a right to this country, just keep in mind that there's a history behind African people that say that it was 20,000 years ago, they say.
Mhm.
that Africans came to this country 20,000 years ago and navigated and made negotiation with with indigenous people right here in this country. So if that's the case, if that's true, which I think it is, then y'all two people need to sit down with each other and discuss some serious issues. Because everybody else stays in the background.
Yeah, no, one thing of the prophecies of the Ojibwe, one of the books we're reading, is that it's not until the light-skinned people come into the circle that the true unity is going to be brought together. And then this is prior to colonization, or at the beginning of colonization of that region's tribes. So I just wanted to put that out there. So, because I do believe, I mean, as a Chicano and as a Limpana Pache, I've been just gaining the strength of just Chicanos and the indigenous people. And then now we bring on our other revolutionary comrades all together. Then there's going to be change. Then they're going to fear us. Then they're going to know what's going to hit them in the end, and it's going to be their pocketbook. And that's all.
Yep.
Comrade Robert.
I was just going to quickly add that I'm sorry. I was going to quickly add that every single colonized country, every single colonized nation deserves their right to self-determination and for decolonization to have power of their own communities and their own destinies. And that's what I want to say. So yeah.
That's another contradiction. But it's valid. It's valid, man. It's valid. I mean, who are we to dictate, man, other people's destinies? We can't do that. I think that. But in reference to people in this country, nations in this country, I think that as far as it's kept, we all should get together and charge genocide. We all should get, by our nationalities, we all should get what is due to us, because as far as it's kept, we all been brutalized, tortured, murdered, assassinated, and all that by the United States. So if we take it to the United Nations, then we charging genocide. And genocide means
comrade.
I want to be in the car. If we go on, I'm riding with you. Okay, that's all.
I was just gonna say, Dr. Rob. I'm sorry for interrupting. I just want to say that, but you want something to say?
Just shortly. I used to think that the nationalist groups and the socialist groups were inherently contradictory, but in a lot of ways, communist revolutions often start by taking regions and making them autonomous zones, and giving those autonomous zones over to the people who work the land. So, in so many ways, communism in America is not necessarily contradictory to a national Azatlan and a national New Africa, and I'd much rather pay my taxes to my comrades in those nation states than to the American military industrial complex that's enslaving the entire world.
Exactly, and to add to what you were saying, because I
trust the humanity of my Azatlan and New African comrades more than the default
state. Ooh. Comrade Rob, I think you muted yourself.
Oh, that was it. I was just gonna let somebody else talk now.
Oh, sorry. I just loved what you said. I want to bounce off of what you said, because I have said before, and I'll say it again. Just like the state, and just like the gun, and just like religion, nationalism is not inherently reactionary. It's not inherently reactionary. Nationalism can be used in a revolutionary manner as well. It just depends on where that nationalism is coming from and how it is used. Because, for instance, if I were to say that I'm nationalistic for the U.S., then obviously my nationalism would be reactionary and white supremacist, you know. But if I were to say my nationalism is for Cuba, then that adds a new, different context, you know. It just depends on where that nationalism comes from. Does it come from a nation that benefits from the exploitation and oppression of imperialism, or does it come from a colonized and oppressed nation, and whether or not they want liberation and self-determination for their own people, you know? I've said before and I'll say again, as long as A, that nationalism comes from a colonized nation, an oppressed nation, and B, that nationalism doesn't interfere with the internationalism of a movement, then that nationalism is revolutionary. And as we said before, in the path of self-determination, these colonized nations will be given, will have the right to self-determination for their own autonomous regions, their own dictatorships of their own proletariats, you know, their own countries, their own states. And hell, you know, maybe once revolution kicks off in the U.S., maybe we'll have something similar to the USSR, where we have multiple socialist republics in unity with one another, you know, council communism and so on and so forth. So yeah, I just want to add to that. I hope that makes sense.
It does. It does make a lot of sense. It does.
Yeah,
Now
that's
that
why,
I look at it,
Mhm.
yeah, it does.
that's why that line of distinction has to be drawn there between nationalism amongst oppressed colonized people versus the nationalism of the oppressors and colonizers themselves, because there is a fucking world
Exactly.
of difference there between
Exactly.
wanting to reclaim your autonomy and agency, your self-determination from an oppressor, versus like the white nationalism that happens here that is of colonizers wanting to further colonize, like, you know, the growth that we've seen over the last few years in white nationalist groups that are straight up fucking racist fascists in areas like New Hampshire. They are literally trying to push for a white ethno state. So therein comes another contradiction, like what you were referring to earlier,
Exactly.
Ricochet, with the idea of forming, you know, individualized countries within the United States, or rather on Turtle Island, where people are calling for separatism by color, because that's also handing the Nazis exactly what the fuck they want to do to New England. You know, that would give them opportunity to be like, well, hey, we want a white ethno state up here. They're already trying to assault and harass anybody of color out of there. It's an area where, like there in Vermont,
Mm-hmm.
there have been multiple murder cases in the last few years of Black people just disappearing and their bodies washing up on the riverside months later and things like that, because those white nationalists are trying to exterminate anybody in the area who's not white that they don't fucking want there. So therein lies another contradiction of how to address that, because there is, yet again, that world of fucking difference between nationalism of the oppressed versus of the oppressor.
Exactly.
When
Beautifully said.
it comes to how those policies are enacted, you know, it's the fascism there that has to be stopped. Not to mention, there's another contradiction there too, of there's going to be people who don't want to leave where they're at just because of it being deemed an ethno state. What do you do then when you're faced with, you know, these issues of people going, well, no, I shouldn't have to leave where I live in the north and move to the south because that's now New Africa. You know, what about people who are of multiple ethnicities? Of, you know, where would we go?
Yeah.
You know,
That's right. That's right.
there's a lot.
It's all contradictions, man.
Yep.
Very
There's a
complicated,
lot of.
very complicated contradictions.
Mm-hmm. I was just going to add. I was going to add to what you were saying, Sister Zen. So Sister Zen, you know, with the Second Rainbow Coalition, we always read, the Statement of Unity, right? And you want to know what it always says in the Statement of Unity? In order for us to live long, meaningful life, one of the things that it says is that we have to have peace with other nations. That's what it says. We need to have peace with other nations. you know, and this goes across the board in general. You know, if we want to have a long and meaningful life, if we want to achieve liberation and a dictatorship of the proletariat and socialism, we need to have peace with other nations, and that includes self-determination. You know, that includes autonomy and having the right to having colonized nations their right to their own stuff, to their own community, to their own people. You know, so yeah, I just want to add that. Hope that makes sense. Because you know, I said it to Comrade Joe, I believe I've said this to you before, you know, but if I remember correctly, I believe I was talking to you about nationalism, and I said that for you, your nationalism is valid because your nationalism doesn't come from the nationalism of the oppressor, but from the oppressed.
Right.
You know, your
Yeah.
nationalism comes from liberation of our people. It doesn't come from it. In short, whether your nationalism is reactionary, revolutionary, all depends on one thing: is it built off of oppression, or rather, does it come from liberation, or does it come from privilege? That's where it all depends on. You know, is your nationalism built on privilege and oppression, or is your nationalism built on liberation and emancipation? That's where it depends whether it's revolutionary or reactionary.
Well,
You know?
this is what I consider myself, and this is what we are considering ourselves. Chicano revolutionary nationalists for the
Mhm.
nation of Aslan.
Hell
So-
yeah.
So that sums it up with what Sister Zen said, and what you're saying, Comrade Gabby. We have to stand for something. We have to.
Exactly.
And we got to follow our traditional ways. We got to follow our and I think they also say it's like with a socialistic scientific approach
Mm-hmm.
into forming that. But at the same time, we have to know who our ancestors are. And like I've been mentioning it, and I'll say it again. We got to know who we come from, to know where we're at, to know where we're going. And only then can we help other people in their struggles. So, and Comrade Robert said, like, and having different nations within this conglomerate of one nation of
A continent.
misled, misrepresented practices for the peoples. Of course, revolution is near at hand. People are fed up. People are sick. And like I always tell people, what are we gonna do about it? Or what? I mean, when some old guy says, "Oh, well, you're complaining about this, but what are you doing about it?" I was like, that was a good point. I was like, get out there, make change, make shit happen. Don't just talk about it and have a meeting about it or a study group about it, which I mean is good to enrich our minds and our souls, to keep on struggling in all our endeavors and all our struggles for humanity's sake. No matter what color of the skin you come from, or what tribe you come from, or what neck of the woods you come out of, let us keep on staying strong. And that's
all power.
all power.
After that. That's right.
Yo, I know, Comrade Rich, I know that your baby, I know that you're carrying your baby, but man, I want to hear what you have to say, man. I want to hear what you have to say. I want to hear your pain so badly. Like, I know you have a lot to say. I know you have a lot to say. I know you do.
Pass the baby off to one of the older kids. Like, here,
Exactly. No. I want no. You know what? I want to hear what the baby has to say. That's what I want to know. I want to hear the revolutionary thoughts of that baby.
All power to the people. No, the baby's awake now, and the baby's downstairs. But I don't know what particular point do you want my opinion on. I don't know. You guys are talking about stuff.
I mean, just in general, you know, like whatever you have on your mind, you know, this book reading, what we're talking about nationalism and different autonomous regions and different dictatorships of the proletariat, you know, whatever you want, you know.
Yeah, no. I think a perspective of this, you know, coming from a White Panther, is how what is the role of a revolutionary, I would say, White Panther in this particular situation. And we know that Black and brown liberation is up against white supremacy, is up against, and is up against this both in the superstructure, and it's up against it in economics, and you know, and through military force, right? So what is the role of the, you know, the white community that comes in the name of a revolutionary, and that is to weaken that, right? Internally within the white spheres, that we have to eradicate that racism that allows that stuff to perpetuate. There's a lot of I would say class reductionists who think it's only about seizing the means of production, and we know that that's not necessarily true, because if a bunch of racist white people seize the means of production, therefore you just have a bunch of racist white people with the power, and that's not going to alleviate what is going to happen in regards of the contradictions that racism brings. So just literally taking the means of production is not going to do that. So we have to combat these ideas, and this is why it's important culturally that within our communities that we bridge these gaps. And I'm gonna say, for real, a lot of white people are scared of people of color, and they don't even want to surround themselves. So intercommunally, there's things to be had there that are going to eradicate those. There's the ideas of racism and white supremacy ideas and stuff like that need to be eradicated. The patriarchy, all these different things that the part of the superstructure that continue to perpetuate this system that we're under. If you think about this, for example, like on the global aspect of this, right? How many people were anti-war when they invaded Ukraine? But then when they're invading Somalia and all these other countries, you don't hear anybody saying anything, right? And these are these ideas of racism that allow these things to happen. But when it happens to a white country, then everyone's anti-war. And this is where you really see that we have to get into the minds of people and really break down those barriers of racism and get true into the spirit of John Brown and John Sinclair and everybody of the past, and teach the revolutionary history of white freedom fighters that fought along the sides of Black comrades and those, you know, things of that nature. Because to be frank, a lot of white people don't even know a history in which to be proud of that has some type of revolutionary presence, because it's drenched in reactionariness. You know what I'm saying? Right. So it's and upholding the status quo. So because white people benefit off of the labor aristocracy, benefit off of capitalism way more than anybody else.
White supremacy, racial hierarchy.
True indeed, exactly. So when we talk about having an aspect of class suicide, it's also an aspect of these ideas that we have to subject ourselves and let people of color speak. Let these spaces over to people who are not like us. And it's okay that the white person doesn't always have to be the leading person in the room and always the one, you know, and you know, and these are things that white people have to deal with internally, right? Battling these things within themselves that really knock down these walls and knock down these contradictions, because it's a natural reaction to some people who think like someone that does not look like them coming from outside, and they're just gonna respond in a defensive manner, you know. And I think it's important that white revolutionaries really hit hard in their own communities to really try to eradicate racism on any level that's possible.
I fucking
That's
love
all.
that so much.
All-
I all power. I love that, Comrade Rob Rich. I love that. I want to say so much, but I don't want to. I don't want to hog. I'm speaking time. So does it. So I want to hear what everyone else has to say about that. Especially especially our non-white comrades here, Comrade Joe and Comrade Kimberly.
Well, my birth certificate says I'm Caucasian. It sounds like a joke, but it's a true story. No, and Sister Kimberly, she went out house shopping, so she's not here with us for the rest of this class or book reading. But like I mentioned earlier, it's going to take all of us to make change, and I share this with everyone. Like, what happens in our communities affect all of us, no matter what color of skin that you carry. And then to make actual change in our communities, it's going to take all of our tones of skin, all of our genetic backgrounds to make change in the community. And then we could take it on, and like I always say, then we could take it on to the city and to the county and to the state and to the region, and then on a national level. So when working with other ethnic origins, it could be difficult because we kind of like say, for instance, I grew up in East Los Angeles, predominantly an all Chicano neighborhood. We had one white guy in the neighborhood, he spoke Spanish. We had one black guy in the neighborhood, he spoke Spanish. So, and of course, living in Los Angeles, you get to, see all kinds of ethnic groups. It's a melting pot of ethnic groups. So I've learned early on to be able to work with different kind of ethnic groups, and I think we have to continue doing that, and only then will change come. Only then will we bring change to our personal communal struggles, and then we can take it nationally. That's all I wanted to say.
All power. Beautifully said. Comrade Shay, I know you have something to say, man. I can see it all over your face.
Well, first of all, I'm a retired social worker. I work with the addicted population of alcohol, also with the addicted population of drugs. And I also work with the people who were dying of AIDS, not HIV, AIDS. And so I worked with that population for some years, and I came to love the people, regardless of who they were. I didn't care, and that's where I'm at right now. I know that we live in a country that is very, well, not exactly very racist. It has come a long way. But January 6th of last year was something else. That wasn't no joke. Where the majority of whites, Republicans, I'll say, dodged the Capitol, and a few people got hurt in the process. And they don't talk about that, but
and that was just them unarmed. Imagine if all of them had guns.
Yeah,
that would be scary as fuck.
And they were unarmed. They were unarmed. We ain't even gonna talk about the ones who were armed, and their guns were taken away from them. We ain't gonna talk about that.
That one guy That one guy, with the butt head.
Yeah.
That one guy with the butt. Remember him?
Yeah. So I'm on paper as a Caucasian myself. I don't know how, because my mother's Jamaican, Black Jamaican, and my father was brown complexion. He was Puerto Rican. So what that makes me, Jamaican Puerto Rican? I guess so. I don't know. But when it comes down to it, I think that whatever is best for the people is what I want. Whatever is best for the people, everybody don't have the same flavor of taste or the same taste, you know what I mean? So if whatever you taste, you take it. Now when it comes to white nationalism is a different thing, because we definitely can't support that. We know what it is.
White supremacy.
And we need to attack it the way it's supposed to be attacked. But when it talks about White Panthers, nationalists, we can understand where that's coming from. When we talk about Black Panthers, we know where that's coming from. Black nationalism, we know where that's coming from. I consider myself a Marxist, Leninist, Maoist nationalist. Nationalist. And the nationalist because of the fact that I believe in the independence of Puerto Rico. I believe that Puerto Rico should be independent, and the United States need to get the fuck out right now.
Same thing with Cuba. National liberation for Cuba.
They need to get the fuck out right now.
They need to get the hell. They need to get the hell out of Guantanamo.
Yeah,
Guantanamo. Get the hell out of there.
There's no need for Guantanamo to even continue. That came out of the Monroe Doctrine.
Yep.
That came out of the Monroe Doctrine.
Yep. Yo, Che, I was gonna make a joke. On your papers, how your birth certificate says they are white, right?
Yeah.
Right. You know what that makes you, Che? Jesus.
And he said his mother was Jamaican and his father is Puerto Rican, so I think that makes you a Jamaican Rican.
That sounds
German
good. Use that one.
No, yeah, that is
I wanted
good.
to throw that out there before I forgot. You're a Jamaican.
That is good.
Okay.
That is good, actually. Holy shit.
I like
And it
that.
makes him a Rasta Rican.
My great grandfather was Jewish, and he came to Cuba, and I'm of partial Jewish descent. So is that like Q-ish? Q-ish. Jesus Christ. But yeah. I love what everyone here is saying, y'all. Y'all are awesome as hell. And I just want to comment on something that comrade Rob Rich said, and you're 100% correct, comrade. I believe I've had these conversations with you before, but I've said it before, I'll say it again. Every single revolution, every single legitimate revolution has always been led by non-white people. Always. From the Bolshevik Revolution up until now, it has always been led by non-white people. Whenever I say that these Pat Sock revisionist MLs always get pissed off. No, the Bolshevik Revolution was led by white people. It was led by white people. And I'm like, these shitheads only think that race is only limited to skin color, but that's not true. That's not true at all. Yes, comrade Rob Rich, you want to say something?
Yeah, I kind of want to add something on. You made me think of something, and then something that was said earlier about being Caucasian. And Stalin was from Georgia. Yeah, and he was from Georgia, which was in the Caucasus regions where the terminology of Caucasian came out of.
He was not considered white. he was literally not considered white by the czar.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm agreeing with you. Hold
No,
on.
yeah, I know.
In the
I'm-
1800s, people, when they had the Trans-Caucasus, what was it? It was 1400s all the way up into I think the 1800s. The people in the Caucasus regions were considered the term Charney, which means dark and uncivilized, and they were subjected to be enslaved and less than humans, and they were not considered white. Not until the 1800s, when they changed, when they started doing that pseudoscience white supremacy stuff, did they end up
with the
changing
skulls.
with the skulls, exactly, that they changed and they adopted the term of Caucasian because of a skull that was from Georgia that
And that
matched, that was to the standard that they wanted it, and then later on then they changed that over. So a lot of people who are from the region of Georgia or from that region actually get offended if you get called white, because the history of it is so it's so backwards, and it shows too how economics and the superstructure connected and how these ideas change, just like how they changed who was considered white in the imperial core, right?
Exactly.
Over a point of time, it was only the Anglo-Saxons that were considered white, and then later it started changing because Italians were not white, Irish were not white, Greeks were not white, all these, exactly. And then later down the line, as economics and politics demanded that these people were given different rights, therefore then they were adopted white as who they became. And it just shows how backwards these ideas are. When you really start doing history on these things, you really see how how I would say misleading they are. All power.
All power to people in your
Another historical point of irony there is that, throughout the human diaspora, people migrating every fucking which way, everywhere from the Caucasus Mountains west through like the Baltics was initially settled by people of West Asia. So we're talking northern India, the Punjabi and Brahmani peoples coming up through there. That is actually the original Aryan race, is brown people from Punjab, India. And so it's kind of ironic that centuries later, Nazis were trying to claim themselves as basically Anglo-Saxon, clearly European descent, claiming themselves to be Aryan, when it's like, well, no, Aryan is actually brown people. And a specific group of brown people that, these Nazis wanted to try to eradicate, because they were putting Romani in these death camps right along with Jews and everyone else from West Asia, and claiming, oh well, you're Untermenschen, subhuman, while simultaneously trying to tie themselves to that ethnicity and racial background of quote unquote Aryan, which they were
cultural appropriation.
Pretty much, yeah. And I see, Rob, you've got your hand up, so I imagine you have some thoughts on that one too.
Oh, I can't wait! Rob has been holding out on us.
No, I don't want to bombard this with whiteness, but there's something here that about whiteness is literally the historical events that have taken place has perpetuated lies over lies over lies. And when we start talking about dialectics on an ideological level, you see how if we're trying to turn something into its opposite, like whiteness, you have to tell the truth, right? To turn it into its opposite. And what happens when you start hearing these things like teaching the truth about our history in school? You get all these reactionaries like, no, you're going to make my kid in school feel white inferiority or something, right? And it's like, you see, they try to protect the lies that have been told. Christopher Columbus discovered America and all this stuff, right? And it's a continuation of this stuff. So that's like, when you see that, we have to do the opposite. We do the opposite of what they're doing. That's what we have to do, because we know that whiteness has and capitalism has a monopoly of the ideas across the planet, and it's like we have to unravel those things by continuously telling the truth about everything from communism to the truth of what really happened during colonization. All these things. This is like it's
The Roman
important because
Empire.
that's how we unravel these things. That's how we break down the system.
Right.
Oh,
Right
power.
on.
That's all I got.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah,
And
100%.
especially when taking into context that it is not just capitalism, as was highlighted earlier in the discussion, that it is capitalist, it is patriarchal, it is, you know, the sexist, the
Misogynist.
homophobic, misogyny, yes, the whole fucking works. And you can't fight only one facet of that without fighting all of that. You know, which is
All
why
the contradictions.
sock lines fall short, because you know they have that form of nationalism that is patriotism to the United States and its system that directly contradicts the other things that we need to fight and dismantle if we're actually going to achieve communism. Ain't nobody out here about to just put their necks on the line for the financial improvement of the wallets of strictly cishet white men. That's not how anything works. We cannot keep the other systems in place that oppress anybody who has pigment or who has a vagina, etc., and down the fucking list of bigotry, which, you know, that right there has to come into conceptualization when it comes to even the global struggle, because like you pointed out, Gabby, it goes back to the Roman Empire even too, with them utilizing the religion of Christianity to forcefully conform people. They removed all facets of divine femininity from that in order to subjugate women, and therefore subjugate half the population right off the bat to exert social control. So therein came the effect of patriarchy. And it took, you know, many hundreds of years later after that before this idea of race was even created in order to
divide and conquer,
justify deeming people of a different skin color to be, you know, subhuman in their fucking eyes, and therefore justify
ethnic group,
the enslavement, the colonization, the whole fucking 9 yards. And it is the culmination of those effects that really, as far as on the global scale, started there with the Roman Empire. It's infected the minds of the entire planet with this system of sexist, racist, patriarchal fucking capitalism, and mind fucked everybody into that conditioning right there, that it's got to be unfucked on every level, not the economic,
but the social and the cultural as well. And I just want to add something very important to what you were saying, Sister Sam, because you got me all hyped up. I talked to this Pat Sock revisionist shithead this one time, and he told me that we don't have to deal with racism because racism predates capitalism. And I was like, okay, does racism predate? Sorry, what?
Sorry, go ahead. Just thinking out loud, like, no.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm fucking saying. Like I was like, racism is a byproduct of capitalism. You know, if I remember correctly, it started with the Anglo-Saxons. Even if racism, you know, predates capitalism, it is through capitalism that racism has become a global phenomenon never seen before by any other socioeconomic system. Never seen before. Same thing with all other contradictions: misogyny, ableism, sexism, ableism, and so on and so forth. All of these contradictions have been used in imperialism, and in fine expanded these contradictions throughout the entirety of the globe, so to where these contradictions are not only contradictions in certain parts of the planet, but all over the planet because of imperialism that comes from capitalism, which start all the way from the fucking Roman Empire to the Anglo-Saxons and so on and so forth. And that's what I want to say.
Well, the best way I could probably describe it is basically birthing twins, except one was you know, born a couple weeks after the other, because capitalism and racism really came into being and idealized and brought to fruition around the same period of time. It started with global expansion of colonialism, of at the time, you know, most of Europe was still under
Roman Empire.
rule of, well, no, this is after that. This is about 500
Right.
So they were under rule of kings and queens. The monarchies had been well established for a long time, and really it came down to one monarchy, because if you actually look at the family trees, or rather wreaths, you will see that all of these monarchies throughout Europe were interrelated. They were all marrying cousins, etc., where really it was one enormous fucking family ruling the entire area. And they had a burgeoning bourgeoisie class that was coming up, as far as like with their lords and ladies shit, you know, they had people who owned land, but then they also had merchants who wanted to socially climb as well, which actually led to the later bourgeoisie revolution. But at the time, they were first starting to plant those roots of capitalism with this expansion via colonialism, where they are sending merchant ships out to all these other parts of the world that they can get to, and start to try to make trade, or to just outright steal resources from other parts of the world. And when it came down to it, it was easier to wage war and colonize and just enslave the people there and steal their fucking resources than it was to try to, you know, make reasonable, honorable trade with other people. So, you know, that was basically an echo of the same type of colonization that had happened under the Roman Empire, only with an even worse effect there of it creating wealth in hands of a bourgeoisie class that started to form at that time. And, you know, this is something that we teach in the Hassan Shakur class too, that in comparison to the feudalism under monarchy, that bourgeoisie revolution was in fact progressive in comparison. However, it was not progressive enough, because it created a new slave class. It created capitalism. It created racism as a byproduct, because that's what they used to try to justify the colonialism and the exploitation and the raping of resources. And, you know, it also comes down to the white supremacist ideal behind manifest destiny of these fucks thinking, well, we are destined to take over the world. Therefore, it is our God-given right and entitlement to go do this to all these other people. See, they've got pigment. They're not as human as we are. And it's all racist fucking bullshit. So that right there, that is where racism was born, of capitalism, of colonization. And it's now gotten to the point where today, okay, we're all in an open air prison. Are we confined, you know, to stay within the four walls of our home and only go from there to work? No, but are we confined economically because we are technically wage slaves? Yes, we are. You know, this is what it has grown to under reformist and neoliberal ideology, where they're like, okay, well, we'll allow, you know, a certain extent of changes, you know, from the civil rights movement, etc. But has anything really fucking changed?
Nope.
Not really. The systemic racism is still there. The systemic sexism and patriarchy is still there. The systemic homophobia is still there.
The lies are still there too.
What's that, Conrad Shay?
The lies are still there too.
You're goddamn right. And that's what all of this is formed on, and it keeps people separated via fighting over these differences between us, instead of actually coming together and fighting that which oppresses all of us. And that's one of the things that we aim to fight, to put an end to,
Yep.
as Comrade Rob Rich said a little while ago, of, that's absolutely the job of the White Panthers, to dismantle racism right there within the white community. That's a huge facet of that, because until we change, and that's the tip of the iceberg. We've got to
Yep.
dismantle patriarchy. We have to dismantle all of these other systemic fucked facets of society through cultural revolution. If we're actually
That's
going
fine.
to see these changes be possible to make happen on a large scale, to actually pull everyone out of this oppression. And a lot of people don't realize just how much of their own shit is feeding and supporting their own oppression.
That's
Yep.
right. That's right.
And
100%.
the racism, the patriarchy, and sexism, the homophobia, the whole fucking 9 yards, that is people squabbling over, oh my God, I'm uncomfortable with how this other person exists. And it's like, that's a fucking you problem. How about we address
Yeah.
the we problem? How about you let go of your fucking hangups and actually get to know somebody who is of this other marginalized group? And maybe you'd see that you're fucking predisposed
Human beings.
notions there that you've been mind fucked to by a system that
Mhm.
would love for you to hate each other. You open your eyes and see how those are fucked.
Yep.
You
know,
Yo,
I've said
Fish.
before, and I'll say it again. Love and camaraderie, and especially revolutionary love, it transcends all forms of contradiction and antagonisms. Regardless of what race you come from, regardless of what gender you are, regardless of if you're neurotypical or neurodivergent or physically disabled, you're my comrade. As long as you acknowledge that things need to be better, and you are willing to put in the work, and you are willing to see to it that you want to better yourself, not just for your own benefit, but for the benefit of others and for your community, you're my comrade. You're just a human being,
Right.
And it's exactly as you were saying, Sister Zen. These reductionists, these pat socks, these revisionist pieces of shit, they only see class struggle as merely economic. They don't see it that way. They only see it in the economic sense, but they don't see it in the social sense. They don't see it in the cultural sense. They don't see all these other contradictions that need to be dismantled from capitalism. It's not just wage slavery that needs to be dismantled, because guess what? Wage slavery is the result. Because wage slavery is the primary contradiction that leads to these other contradictions forming: racism, misogyny, ableism, the patriarchy, and so on and so forth. To combat capitalism, you have to combat all of it. You have to combat both the primary and the secondary contradictions, because if you don't, then those secondary contradictions will lead to the formation of the primary contradiction, or those secondary contradictions like racism and misogyny will become the primary contradiction. You have to combat all of it. You can't just leave one out, because guess what? If you leave one out, if you leave one antagonism out, you know what's going to happen? It's going to fester. It's going to build up, and guess what? The revisionists are going to use that to make us hate each other, to divide ourselves, and to bring society back on the capitalist road. That's what they're going to do. That's why cultural revolution is so important.
When it comes down to it, revisionism actually supports capitalism and the existing
Yep.
system. It's basically doing a cha-cha dance of, step forward,
Yep.
step back, step forward, step back. You never really
Yep.
fucking get anywhere, because it can always be undone by, the next group of people in office.
Yep.
So it's futile. It serves
Yep.
no real purpose. All of these things have to be addressed. And that's something that I genuinely appreciate. One of the books we need to add to the list for this reading group is Bell Hook's book, Killing Rage, Ending Racism. And one of
Ooh.
the things that has stuck in my mind ever since the first time I read it in that book is where she made it very plain and fucking simple that the system is not just capitalism. This system is white supremacist capitalist patriarchy. You cannot separate one from the other. You have to address them all. And she's got some grand advice in that book on how to do so and how to dismantle this fucking shit.
I have a quote. I have a quote from Mao, if y'all want to hear, if it's okay.
Sure. And then we should get wrapping things up with final thoughts, because we are at about 2.5 hours now.
100%. I just wanted to say this quote because I think you're going to absolutely love it. Sister Zen. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Let me just get, I'm trying to find it. There it is. All right. Sorry, I'm just trying to find it.
Asking me if I'm
Here
ready
it
and
is.
you're asking me ready yet.
Here it is. Here it is. Here's the quote. It seems that right up to the present, quite a few have regarded Marxism-Leninism as the ready-made panacea. Once you have it, you can cure all your ills with little effort. There's a type of childish blindness that we must start a movement to enlighten these people. Those who regard Marxism-Leninism as religious dogma show this type of blind ignorance. We must tell them openly, your dogma is no use. Or to use an impolite formulation, your dogma is less useful than shit. We see that dog shit can fertilize the fields and man's can feed the dog. But dogmas, they can't fertilize the fields, nor can they feed a dog. Of what use are they? And yeah, I love that quote whenever I read it. I love it.
I dig it.
But yeah, to wrap up, any final thoughts at all of what we talked about in this book? Because I loved this conversation, y'all. I fucking loved it. I really did.
Every day we have some good positive discussions.
Every day.
This is true.
You know,
That's-
sisters. Oh, sorry.
To say it's a good thing because the things that we learn and are therefore able to then teach others. This right here is inspiration. It's one thing to have only book clubs, but when we're doing book clubs to learn from and then actually working towards putting that into our praxis, it's revolutionary as fuck.
That's what's up. Yo, Sister Zen, one of the books that I also want to read eventually is How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. That's also essential to read as well.
Yeah. We should note those in the Discord channel.
100%.
That way we've got a running list of books.
Hell yeah. Well, if no one else has any thoughts whatsoever or any comments to say anymore, this is where we're going to be wrapping up. Thank you everyone for coming here. I appreciate every single one of you and what you have to say and your thoughts and your education. Thank you so much for making this book club reading so educational and so much fun to have. I'm grateful that we even have people come here. And I just want to let you know that even if only one person watches these, even if only one person is sticking around to watching these live streams, as long as one person is watching these, as long as they're being radicalized and encouraged to do better and build solidarity within their communities, that consider that a success,
Right. Being a positive influence, being the change that we want to see in the world.
And that's why I love, if there's one person who's being encouraged to do better and be better by this, then that makes me happy. And I know that at the very least, I passed away knowing I did something good in this world. And I want y'all to know that you're also contributing to that too. But with that being said, all power to the people, and I love every single last one of you guys. All power.
All power to the people.
All power.
All power.
Comrades. And Sister Zen, we're just a phone call away.
Thank you.
Indeed.
We'll see you guys on Friday.
Hell yeah.